I also work with team dynamics, conflict management, behavior profiling. So really around what I like to call the human skills that make us human. And so I'm very excited to share today's session with my friend and colleague, Terence. So Terence, over to you. Maybe you can just intro yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And specialize in financial planning, free of the compulsory purchase of a policy, as unfortunately many people have experienced. So it's to work with you, to know what's important to you and where we're going to use your time, your resources, your capital to reach your goals. So working with you to design those custom plans, and especially around family planning, financial planning for families. And this topic with Paula is definitely what ties in with that, so that we can always just feel comfortable to discuss our financial affairs and money matters with our partner.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to this because this is a topic that often comes up in the work that I do around working with couples in particular. Finances or money is one of the top 5 things that couples argue or fight about and can often end up getting divorced over.
Yeah, it is quite a touchy subject, and I'm not sure why, but people find it rather uncomfortable to share and talk about their finances. Paula, what have you found with that in your practice?
Yeah, definitely. So before I get into answering that question, I just wanted to say to the people that have joined us, please do, we want this to be valuable for you. We want it to be engaging. We want you to walk away with your questions answered or information that you want to know. So please feel free to post your questions in the chat. You can either do it anonymously if you want, or you can send it privately to Terence or myself. And we'll make sure we answer your questions. And at the end of the session, we're going to leave the last sort of 15 minutes or so to sort of have an open discussion for any of those of you that do want to ask us questions. So please, we want this to be conversational. We want this to be engaging. So Terence, in my work that I do and what I've seen over the years with working with couples and healthy relationships and toxic relationships is that we don't like talking about money because money is not a sexy topic from a relationship perspective. And a lot of this stems from our childhood and our upbringing, because that's where a lot of our money values or money relationships come from. We learn from our primary caregivers, so our parents, around the value of money, the use of money, how to engage with money. So in other words, our relationship with money. And that creates our money value system that we then carry with us into our own adult relationships. So if we didn't have open money conversations at home with our parents as children, if we didn't hear our parents talking about money and also how they spoke about money, you know, was money the root of all evil kind of thing? And, you know, those messages. So when I was growing up, it was money doesn't grow on trees.
Yeah.
And, you know, where do you think that I'm going to get the money from? Do I just have a money rainbow at the end of the garden? You know, those are the kind of messages that I grew up with from my parents. So money was always a scarcity. It was never an abundant conversation. And I think it's partly to do with generational, obviously, because, you know, my parents going back, that generation was the kind of money was a means to an end. You went to work, you made the bacon, you brought the bacon home kind of thing, and you provided for your family. So that's the source of where our money values come from. Now, depending on the two couple and your different backgrounds and experiences and value systems, you now come together and you bring those money values into your relationship. And if you as a couple don't sit down and find a way of blending and creating your own money values and relationships, or relationship with money in your relationship, we can tend to end up repeating the same cycles, positive, negative, and I always talk about positive and negative relationships. And that's kind of where it starts from, and then how it ends up where couples bring it up in the work that I do with them, or where they end up it being one of the top 5 things that couples fight with. What do you see when you work with couples when it comes to a financial planning perspective?
Paula, yeah, it's often that conversation hasn't come up. It gets a bit uncomfortable. I have found that in the relationships, some are spenders and some are savers. and they clash a little bit around that. They know that they've sort of got common goals. You know, if there's children, it's obviously we always want the best for the children. We want the best possible schooling, etc. But it's never really delved in quite a lot of depth. And that's where I start asking questions. And sometimes, yeah, it does make people feel a little bit uncomfortable, but we need to get to what really drives you and what really motivates you. So that I feel then as a family, you're going as a common unit, you're going all together on this journey to reach a destination that you all want to get to. And you should feel comfortable speaking to your spouse, especially now if you're married, if it's, you know, now you've reached that point in your life, you shouldn't have, you shouldn't feel uncomfortable talking to someone that you now want to share the rest of your life with about something that will affect both of you, to make sure that the family gets to where they want to go. So that crops up a lot. And sometimes spouses don't know what the others have, like you've said. They don't share, they don't understand, they don't tell each other, you know, my salary is mine, yours is yours, and he'll pay the food and I'll pay the water and lights, but no one really communicates. And it's to break those barriers down and to find the commonality and the shared values.
Yeah, and often this is when couples come to see me where there's underlying resentment, because over the years couples have got into this routine of the way that they live their life. And when it comes to money, as you say, often there is a non-disclosure, because over the years, as we get promotions or new jobs or bonuses and those kind of things, we don't sit down and say, well, how are we spending our money? So the important thing about a relationship and a healthy relationship is retain your individuality, but then come together and co-create the us, we, and the ours. And the same happens from a financial perspective. It's about couples having to discuss in terms of how are we going to manage our money? Are we going to have one bank account and we put all our money into one bank account and we work from that? Or are we going to have a bank account that we run the household from, and we're going to have a separate bank account for savings, but then we'll also have our own bank accounts that we can have our own money that we can spend any way we want, and we don't have to check in with each other or get permission from each other. But over the years, as our sort of earning capacity changes, or heaven forbid something happens like you get retrenched, and one partner now becomes the breadwinner. And I see this often with younger couples where women are now earning a lot more than men in the relationship, and it can have an impact on the relationship where, from a male perspective, the perception is, you know, I'm not the man, I'm not the provider, I'm feeling emancipated, you know, my wife's earning more than me, and that can cause issues in a relationship as well, and it doesn't have to. You know, for me, the way I like to use money is an energy. It comes and goes, it ebbs and flows. And so if you think of a typical month, in the beginning of the month, there's lots of energy and flow. And when you get to the end of the month, there's very little energy and very little flow, because there's very little money left at the end of the month.
Yes, yes, very true. And that's, and many people have a conflicting view on this, and that's why I like budgeting with clients and the exercise of budgeting. And it's not to have the rigidity of saying, well, we're only allocating 1,000 Rand a month to take out, but it's to be aware of our spending. And we all need to be aware of what we do in all aspects of our life. I feel if we're aware of it and we know what we're doing and the journey we're going along, we can measure and track our progress as we do, especially like you've said, where income differentials kick in, where families now start having the conversation with their children as the children now grow up. And it's hopefully that they have better conversations than we had with our parents. And it's to teach, I believe, and it's my personal belief, and what I do in my home is the growth mindset. So, you know, we might not have money for something now, but let's then learn about saving, and let's learn about investing, and the benefit of doing that, as opposed to going in debt for something that and that, I think, is definitely those conversations around wants and needs also is important between the couples, as well as what they share with their children.
Yeah, very much so. And what often comes up when I'm working with couples is, particularly when it's got to the point where it's already down that rocky road heading towards divorce, is that it can become quite toxic around the money.
Yeah.
And money can be used as a form of control to try and retaliate or get back at partners because of all the underlying emotional hurt and pain that has happened in the relationship from a couple point of view, and then obviously from a kid's perspective. But for me, I think where it's really important is starting at home and teaching kids the value of money and the earning capacity of money. So we're teaching them critical life skills. We're teaching them about accountability, responsibility, how to be creative and come up with solutions to earn money, and how to save. So things like household chores, I know a lot of parents these days, modern families, that's fine, we'll just give our kids pocket money, that kind of thing. But I think they're missing out a huge opportunity to teach kids important critical life skills that will play out in their adulthood around managing money and being responsible and accountable with money.
Absolutely. And it's to create the positive value sets and emotions around that and sharing those with your children. Sadly, though, I think some parents haven't learned that themselves, as they haven't had it from, the natural lineage, so from their parents, and they might not have a comfortable relationship with money either. And it's that to learn that skills, and that's what I enjoy doing along the journey, where it's the right person and they're looking for that kind of insights. And to keep it simple. The financial industry loves complexity, lots of jargon, lots of big complicated words, and we really don't need it to be like that. It really can be very simple concepts that, you need to have some savings, for instance, in an emergency fund. Then you start looking at investments and different investment solutions and making sure that these align with what your goals and objectives are, both from the parent side as well as the children. Thankfully, I'm going on holiday in December. My daughter gets a bit of money for doing chores around the house. And now it's time to tally it up. We do it on a tick board. And at the end of the month, we tally it up. We do a bit of maths as well. And now we're starting to show her the value of not taking it all today, giving some to dad, and he will give you some extra in return. And that is interest. And if you delay your gratification of spending, we can keep it to go on holiday. You can get a couple of things on holiday, but I'll give you a few extra notes to go with in your purse. And after the third month of doing that, she now doesn't want to take anything, and she wants to pocket it all for the holidays and for future savings. So it's that ongoing conversation, but keep it nice and simple and match it to their age and their ability to understand.
Yeah, very good advice there. So to those that joined us before we started, or since we've been chatting, just to say that if you do have any questions you want to ask us, to please put it in the chat group. We will make sure that we answer your questions. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end, so you're welcome to wait until then if you want. But yeah, if something comes up that we're chatting about, you want to know more about, please do share that in the chat group, and we'll gladly answer it for you.
Also, what you're doing in your personal homes, share your tips for success and what happens in your couple and your relationships.
Yes, absolutely, because we can all learn from each other here.
Yeah.
So COVID has obviously brought a lot of stress to families and to homes and to relationships. Some people have had to take salary cuts. Some people have lost their jobs. What are some of the tips that you would say to people in terms of how do they manage the situation now from a financial perspective? What are their options?
Yeah, it's a very tough one, Paula, and also it's quite a long way through the journey now. But the biggest one, and look, I understand protect our head and put food on the table, it can do. The tax consequences are dire and they will bite you in future years to come. So really that needs to be the last point of contact. And then it's to talk to your credit providers. So where you've got your home loan, your vehicle finance, etc., come up with terms, understand the terms and conditions of the payment holidays quite specifically, as there was a lot of T's and C's and still is around that. And you've just got to be really cautious of where you're spending your money and make sure it is really around the needs your family has as opposed to the wants. So I hope no one shoots me for this, but cancel DSTV. You don't need it if you've lost some income. Go and read a book or play with your kids. And when times change, possibly bring it back.
Yeah. And so what I'm seeing in the work that I do is, with this impact of the stress that couples or individuals are under from a financial point of view, whether we like it or not, we take work to home and we take home to work. And this financial stress is now playing out in relationships and in homes in terms of brings stress into the relationship. With one person, depending on who it is, underneath that is underlying fear. Because when we lose financial means, it talks to our basic survival skills or needs. If you think of Maslow's hierarchy, I've got to put a roof over my table, a roof over my head, food on my table, I've got to take care of my family. And so we're talking to that basic need. And when that basic need is rocked or shaky, it brings in fear and anxiety and worry and overwhelm and concern, which is perfectly normal to experience those things. So first of all, from a self point of view and a relationship point of view is acknowledging that, yes, this is where I am and this is what I'm feeling right now, okay? And then what are my options? So I like to use the acronym of FAIR and working through fear. And Terence, I think because we've chatted about this. So the F stands for facts. What are the facts right now? Okay, I've had to take a salary cut, or I've lost my job, or whatever it is. Okay, those are the facts. Because we can only work with facts. We can't work with unknown factors or elements. So what are the facts right now? Then the E stands for emotions. What are the emotions that I'm experiencing right now? Stress, overwhelm, etc. Then the A is action. What one action can I take right now? Maybe I have to reach out to my bank and ask for some help or advice or restructuring my debt. Maybe I need to speak to my financial planner. Maybe I need to speak to friends or family. But most importantly, speak to your partner first.
Yes. Yes,
because your partner provides a source of support and helping you get through this. So you're in this together. You're a team. That's what a relationship is. It's a partnership. And then go through what if I could take one action now, what is that? And when I've taken that action, what is my new reality? Because when you take one step forward, doesn't matter how small it might be, it feels less overwhelming and that you're out of control or life is out of control, but that you're back in control again because you've taken an action. And so this can help you manage your own stress, but also from a relationship stress and being supportive of each other and being there for each other and going through this. You don't have to go through it alone. You're not alone in this. And even if you are single and on your own, you're not alone because you've got family and friends that you can turn to. And if you can't turn to your families and friends, there's obviously support structures out there like SADC and Lifeline and other places that you can reach to. So I see we have a question. It says, what are your thoughts on paying off debt or saving? If you had 1,000 Rand in debt and 1,000 Rand in savings, would you use 1,000 Rand saving to cancel out the debt?
Roxy, if you only have 1,000 Rand in debt, yes, go squash it. Go pay it off now, settle it immediately. If the outstanding debt is a little bit larger, what I like to do, and very simplistically, is let's look at the interest that's being charged on your debt versus what you would get from a return on investments. With interest rates at the moment being at 50-year lows, it's definitely in one's best interest to settle debts as quickly as they can. Then take the funds that you were using to pay off the debt, as well as any extra funds you were putting into that debt, and now we need to use those wisely in various investment structures to make sure you can catch up the lost time that you weren't investing. So if it really is just 1,000 Rand of debt, please go pay that off, get it done, get it off your name, and then catch up your investing after that.
Good advice. But now, a question that often pops up is payment holidays.
Yes.
Do we or don't we take them? And what's the fine print, the T's and C's?
Yeah, Paula, it's a hard one. It's not possible to say everyone must have the same approach. We obviously got to look at your situation where possible. Where you've been offered a payment holiday, exactly that. Understand the T's and C's, because often the interest that's now would have been charged during your payment period is added on to the end, or your term is extended, but interest is still being calculated on that debt. So even though they don't expect, or you don't have to pay it, you're still being charged. And if you can catch that up, that is great. If they allow you to do so, that's even better. What I would like people to first try and do before taking a payment holiday, see if they can do a payment negotiation. So if your bond is 10,000 Rand a month and the interest portion is 7 grand, and if you can afford it, pay the 7 grand. At least the interest is being paid and that it's not compounding on itself, because compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. But if you don't know how it works, it's going to work against you. And the same like that on debt. So if you can at least pay the interest portion on your debt, do so, and then catch up when you're in a financial position to do it. But payment holidays obviously have saved a lot of families, a lot of businesses. I think the true cost of it, we're only going to start feeling now and in months to come. But again, you know, if you have no money in your bank account, you have to take what is available to you. Just try and make some informed decisions. And I am a strong believer of ask questions and keep asking questions till you get answers to them. And if the consultant you're speaking to on the phone in a call center doesn't have the answers, keep pushing till you get it. Don't just accept things blindly.
Yeah, definitely so.
You know, that is critical. Paula, you mentioned that money is obviously one of the 5 stress factors in a relationship. What could be your 3 best tips for people to have in their relationships around having better money conversations and feeling safe to have these money conversations?
Yeah, that's a good question. And an important one. And as I said, it helps with couples to really start having these conversations early on in the relationship. And there's a few clues that you can look for when you first start dating someone to get an idea of where they're coming from a money perspective. So, for example, are they always on shopping sprees? Are they always out buying stuff? Are they always going on lavish holidays? Are they splashing out? Or are they being quite responsible and buying things that they need, not what they want, because those are 2 different things? Do they chat openly about money in terms of just general conversations, not necessarily from a couple relationship perspective, but just how do they talk about money in general? When you go out on dates, for example, dinners or whatever, how is it managed? Is it like, do you wait to see who pays first? Does it come up and go, well, I'll get this one, you get the next one? Or is it, well, we go Dutch and we share 50-50 from the start? Those are already little clues that you can get in terms of where someone's coming from a money perspective. And the earlier on you start having these conversations, the easier it will be to have them down the line, because you would have already established that grounding or that footing to have money conversations. But in terms of where you struggle to have them, it's about really creating a safe space and having the conversation at the right time. So not at night when you're going to bed and you're angry with each other and you're tired, because that's just going to cause trouble, even more trouble. Yeah. And not at the end of the month when you're feeling stressed because you've got all these bills to pay. So find the right time and the right space to have the conversation. And if you can't have it as a couple, then go and find someone to have it with, to mediate the process for you, whether it's a financial planner, a coach, a counselor, a pastor, your elders, whoever it is that you feel comfortable with and safe with and trust that they will be able to help you see both perspectives and both sides, to find a middle ground and a way of working forward with having those money conversations. It's also important to understand, why is it uncomfortable potentially for you or your partner to talk about money? Where does that uncomfortableness come from? And generally that's where it starts coming from childhood, because we didn't have those kind of conversations. So, you know, it's unfamiliar. Yeah. That's where we can start establishing those kind of conversations. And then also from a self point of view, what is your relationship with money? because that says a lot about, you know, how you manage your money. So I always like to say, if you can imagine that you are in a romantic relationship with money, how would you treat, engage, and show up for money every day? Are you going to hold on to it and be controlling and mistrusting and all of those things, and try and, you know, control it as much as you can? Or are you going to allow it the freedom to be independent and move and come and go and flow in your relationship like you would a partner? Do you respect money, or do you have a positive or negative relationship with money? How do you see, what's your relationship with money? So that's another way that you can look at that and how it can help you have conversations around money.
Okay, very, very interesting. And what I try and do, and I always share in my consultations with my clients, is what I do and what I use. And Janine and I, every 6 months, we go out for a cappuccino. We go somewhere that is quietish, so try and find a garden setting type of environment. And that's where we go and have our conversations. We see what we've done the last 6 months, where we want to be the next, and then review our 3- and 5-year plan. You know, and what's important to us, what's not, what's changed, where incomes have changed, like you've said. There's been circumstances where we've had to make adjustments, like COVID, you know, and pause things or increase or decrease things as necessary. And it's to always have that comfort to be able to do so, and find a safe place to do so. What I have found works well is don't spring it on your partner. So don't be like, Paula, come sit on the couch, I want to have a chat. You know, raise it. Go, look, there's a money thing I want to talk about. When is good for you? Because like you've said, your mindset and where you are is so critical to whether you're going to absorb this and be in a good place to have this conversation. So try not to do it as a surprise visit, but plan it, make an appointment of it, and really engage and have an open, honest conversation, and be open to hearing your partner's point of view. So don't go in with a closed mind that you've made up your mind. Hear what they have to say and genuinely listen. And that works quite well.
And definitely part of that is managing. So one of the other things that crops up with couples is that of unmet expectations. We go into a relationship with an expectation of how our relationship is going to play out and how our partner is going to be, act, and behave. But often we don't share that expectation with our partner. So we end up setting our partner up for failure before we've even begun, because we've created this expectation that they're not matching or reaching. And so we feel let down and disappointed by our partner when we were the one that set them up for failure in the first place. Yeah. So it's also about having realistic expectations and managing expectations from both sides. And this is where part of going into a relationship is sitting down and having that conversation from a relationship and a partner perspective. What is my expectation of you as a partner? What is my expectation of you as a relationship, or, you know, from a relationship point of view? And how are we contributing to the relationship? And that's why I always say we contribute we have different currencies in our relationship. Money is one currency, but the pillars that we contribute is we contribute on a functional level. So functional is the doing things, like we do things for each other, we do things, the household chores, the shopping, those kind of things. Then there's the emotional contribution. So how am I showing up and creating emotional connection and safety and being there for my partner on an emotional level? And then there's the financial level as well. And it's managing those expectations. So from a money point of view, if your partner's earning 100,000 Rand and you're earning 50,000 Rand, you can't have the expectation that you're now going to pay for everything 50-50, because that's unrealistic. Your partner won't be able to keep up, and it will cause resentment over the years. So you have to look at managing expectations of what seems realistic and fair from a contribution point of view financially, and then look at the other pillars, because your relationship is more than money. You've got to look at the whole perspective of your relationship and the different ways that you are showing up and contributing to your relationship. I just want to say to everybody, we are recording this and we will send out the link to the recording afterwards as well. And if you have any questions, to please post them in the chat group, either privately or anonymously, or just as you want. We are going to have a little 15 minutes or so at the end. But something that comes up is particularly around wills. Wills is a big thing. Why do we need wills? Why are they important? How often should we look at them, and what needs to be in them? Because I heard something the other day about a section, I don't know if it was a section 18 something or other, but I was like, whoa, this looks like higher grade stuff.
So Paula, it ties in actually nicely with what you've said, is where you discuss everything and openly together. And a will creates that conversation, which is quite nice, because that's where we now have to remove all our barriers, because we've worked hard for the things that we've accumulated. And we want to make sure they go to the right people and the right people share in their value. Africans to chat to their financial planners or their lawyers, and you can get a free will drafted this week. The importance of having a will can't be understated, or is it overstated? I'm not sure. But this now tells the world what you would like to happen when you are no longer around. It doesn't have to be complex. Again, I like to keep things simple. And you should have your own will. I know people now feel they're married and it doesn't matter what marital regime you are in, but it's to design a estate plan and your will on your passing. So this is where you're going to decide who gets what out of your estate. And from that, what criteria needs to be met, for instance, to pass it along. So you might have minor children. We don't want the minor children receiving large policy payouts. So for instance, funds can be passed along to a guardian, or I would prefer that someone uses what's called a testamentary trust in their will, a provision for that, so that their children's inheritance can be protected for them. The funds are used to look after them, to pay for their school fees, their medical aid, for instance, wherever they now might be living. And at a particular point, once they've reached a majority or an adult, that trust can now dissolve and they can receive out of that trust their inheritance. My rule of thumb and recommendation is not younger than 25. I know of many, especially guys, it's an ego thing, I suppose. But if you turned 18 and received 2 million Rand, I think a lot of sports car sales would take place. And yeah, it wouldn't go well. And how often to review it? Definitely include it in your annual review and conversation with your spouse and your financial planner, but especially to review it around birth of new children. If there is a significant change in your assets, so you've acquired more property or your business has grown significantly. If there's a change in guardianship nominations, as children age, you may also want to make different changes to that. And then sadly, if there's death or divorce, most certainly update your will at that point in time. You want to make sure that this will is as up to date as possible. What is even more important is that it can be found. Paula, many people draft the best possible will and hide it, and no one knows where it is. Well, then it's not the best will anymore. So have 2 or 3 signed copies, original signed copies. Give one to the executor that you've nominated, for instance, one to your financial planner. Keep one that your spouse knows where to find. And yes, it's confidential, so perhaps it needs to be hidden or locked away, but it shouldn't be a secret. And then always get good advice around the drafting of your will. There's a number of provisions that are really important to include in there. And when designing it, like you've said, there's lots of laws that factor into the drafting of a will. So you want to have it legally drafted correctly, but also financially viable and valid for an executor to roll out. So something like having liquidity available, so there's enough money to pay next month's debit orders while you're waiting for the life cover to pay out. Or the company insurance benefits, the group life and the retirement funds, etc. So you want to make that as clear and easy for an executor to do, and ensure they have sufficient capital and funds to do. So yeah, definitely it's something that must be done and should not be put off. So in my mind, everyone needs one. When you're married, very important. When you have children, it's a non-negotiable. You must have a will.
And I see we have a question for you. Is it
Yes.
better to have your own individual will, or is a joint will just as suitable?
There, I still believe an individual will is best. Sadly, and from the executors I've spoken to, people tend to pass away individually. It seldom happens that, mom and dad are in the same car and pass away together. So their estates are going to get wound up individually. An original will has to be lodged at the master's court. Now, if that will is at the master's court and that estate is being wound up, and the surviving spouse passes away having not drafted their own will, they run the risk of passing away without a will. And then the Intestate Succession Act, the laws within that act would now kick in, and they are very rigid, very stringent, and a court has to now decide on how your estate is divided up. So I definitely think that you should have your own wills. And often, the cases where husband leaves everything to wife, wife leaves everything to husband, failing that it all goes to the kids. So they can be a mirror image of each other, but definitely have your own will. It's critical.
Great, thanks. I see there's some more questions coming through. So for everyone, if you do have questions, please pop them there. We will answer them. So I see there's two questions. It's more from a couple's point of view and moving in and getting married. So how to approach dating and moving in together, and how to approach that transition, especially with money and then the other currencies that I mentioned.
Yes.
So yeah, as I said, it's really around starting to have those money conversations early on. If you are going to be moving in together, it's understanding, first of all, from a financial point of view, where are you at from an earnings perspective, so that you obviously know what your budget is and the type of place and kind of place and lifestyle that you can afford. And having conversations around who will be paying for what. If you don't want to open up a joint bank account just yet, and you still want to keep your money separate, then draw up what are the household expenses going to be in terms of rent, lights, water, food, etc., your earnings, and who's going to pay for what, so that it seems fair in relation to what you're earning. You also need to talk about expectations around managing and running the household. So things like cooking, cleaning, washing, groceries, and those kind of things. The day-to-day running of a household, how are you going to share those roles and responsibilities? There may be certain things that you like and you enjoy. So, for example, in my household, my hubby does 80% of the cooking, which I love and adore and appreciate him for, because it frees me up to do, and obviously the kind of work that I do work long hours, but then I contribute to our relationship in other ways. So maybe start with what are the things that you want to do or enjoy doing, and that you're willing to take on those roles and responsibilities. And then the things that are left over, how do you share them out, or perhaps even put them on a roster that 1 week it's your turn, 1 week it's my turn, that it doesn't become a resentful chore, and that, well, I'm always doing this and I hate doing this, because that can cause issues as well. Depending on, and then most important is, what are your relationship boundaries? Boundaries are things like your deal breakers, your non-negotiables. So, for example, deal breakers, non-negotiables are things like cheating, as an example. Cheating is a non-negotiable, it's a deal breaker, but you need to understand, what does cheating mean in each person's world. So, for example, in my world, it could be the fact that you've done the deed with somebody means you're cheating. In Terence's world, it could be, well, the fact that you're texting someone behind my back is cheating. So you need to have clarity and understanding what those things mean in each other's world, so you know exactly where you stand with each other, you're on the same page. Because what that does is it creates your boundaries around your relationship, that protects your relationship and each other, not only when you are with each other, but when you are away from each other as well, in terms of how you think about your relationship, how you speak about it, and how you treat each other when you're together and when you're not with each other. Okay. So that's another important thing to look at. How are you going to resolve conflict? Most important, because every relationship, by default, you're going to have conflict, whether it's a personal relationship or a professional relationship. Conflict is as simple as you are going to disagree on something. It doesn't have to be a huge, big, screaming match and argument. By default, by being two different people and individuals, you are going to disagree on something at some point. So how do you work through that or around it, or find a middle ground, or even agree to disagree but still do it respectfully? In other words, it doesn't become toxic where you start naming, shaming, blaming, and calling each other all the names under the sun and swearing at each other, and it becomes toxic because it just erodes your relationship. Communication, very important. Work around how are you going to communicate with each other all the time, even on the bad days, the down days where you feel like, I hate this person and I want to kill them, because there are going to be those days. It's life. How do you still communicate and go, you know what, right now I'm so angry with you, but I'm still in this relationship and I'm still committed? Because conflict doesn't mean your relationship's not working. It doesn't mean you're not compatible. It doesn't mean you're not meant to be together. It just is feedback that something's not working in your relationship. How do you find a solution? So Naya, I hope that's given you some food for thought and some tips on how to transition and go through that process of moving from dating to commitment, whether it's moving in together or getting married. Those are some of the things, key things to look at. And then obviously lifestyle and career aspirations and family aspirations and those kind of things down the line. How do you feel about those things, that you make sure you're still on the same page? And then I had another question that came through around, getting married and drawing up antenuptial contracts, and how do we have those conversations, and what if my partner wants one kind of contract and I want the other? And there's this expectation that once our contract is drawn up, we're never going to talk about money again. Well, sorry to say, but it's unrealistic to think that you will never ever talk about money again in your relationship, because you have to. It is one of the contributors to making a relationship successful and growing together as a relationship, as a couple, and as a lifestyle. For example, if you want to buy a new house, if you want to go away on holiday, if you want to send your kids to private school, you have to talk about money in your relationship. And so if there's some resistance around the kind of contract that you're drawing up, I would then suggest you get to the bottom of what's underneath that resistance. What is going on there? Is there a sense of fear? Is there an anxiety? Is there something else going on? Has this person had a bad experience before? What's underneath that? And let's resolve that first before we sign a marriage contract. So I hope that's helped those questions. If there's any other questions for me, please pop them in the chat box, or for Terence. We've got about 15 minutes left. So Terence, the last thing before we open up for questions and that to the audience is things like RAs and pensions and provident funds, and should I be cashing them in now and moving my money overseas with COVID and the economy?
No, Paula, don't do such a thing. Look, your investment strategy is going to play a big factor here. And for me, retirement planning doesn't mean RA or pension or provident fund, etc. There's often very strict rules around those, and I don't want to get into too much technicalities, but your RAs, you'll only be able to cash out if you're 55 or older. There's 2 or 3 exceptions to that. Your pension and provident fund is dangerous to cash out. You're going to pay significant taxes. So the first 25,000 Rand you take out would be tax-free, but then it's used up and finished. And thereafter, it's between 18 and 36%. Now, moving funds offshore is not a bad idea. I'm not saying offshore investing is wrong, but here's some interesting numbers I looked at just before our session tonight. On the 3rd of April, so that was a couple of days after lockdown level 5 started in South Africa, the rand to the dollar was 19 Rand 5 cents. Today, it is 16 Rand 22. If you took your money out of South Africa at 19 Rand today, you are crying very miserably. But if it was part of a strategy, the correct asset mix, and it's part of a long-term planning scenario, Then there's also a couple of other factors like your rand cost averaging. And yes, you can't time the market, but we try and do a bit of timing in the market and knowing when is a better time to do things. Making financial decisions based on emotions is always a recipe for disaster. It is never, ever going to work well. Always try and gather as much facts as possible. Talk to 2 or 3 different people. You know, if you saw a doctor and he gave you a very bad diagnosis, you would get a second opinion, maybe a third. So please don't just talk to one financial planner. Get 2 or 3 opinions and decide for yourself, do your own due diligence to decide, you know, what could work best in your situation, because each person is unique. And I often see these type of questions pop up on various social media platforms, and everyone has an opinion and they're entitled to it, but we don't know the bigger picture. And if someone asks me a question like you just have, I can't answer it without asking them probably a dozen more questions. You know, it's the same way you see your doctor and you say you're feeling a bit yucky and your nose is blocked, etc. He doesn't just write out a script. He takes you to the back office, you know, and he checks your blood pressure and your throat and your nose and eyes. And so there's a whole bunch behind it. So please don't ever cash out retirement funds. As their name says, they're for retirement. And no matter the reasoning, there is very few. And one of the participants on tonight is a great mentor of mine. And I'm sure he'd agree with me. There is seldom ever a good reason to cash out a retirement fund to do anything else with it, except to retire one day when it's the right time. One more thing I just wanted to add to your answer for Neo is if you guys are moving in together and it's going to be something quite permanent, create a cohabitation agreement. It alludes to what Paula said.
Yes.
Sadly, if that relation, we all love each other. Who needs a contract until things go wrong? And you want to know that, like, I bought the fridge and you bought the lounge suite, and when we leave, we can each take it. So as horrible as this is, kind of treat the marriage or the partnership or the union like a business and keep records. It doesn't sound like fun, but it is important.
Yes, absolutely. Good point. So yeah, we've got about 10, 12 minutes left. So I'm going to open the floor to anybody that has questions. If they would like to ask, you're welcome to unmute yourself now and ask myself or Terence, or pop it in the chat group. I'll give people a few minutes if you want to unmute. Now's your chance. I see there are some questions coming through. Yeah, so another question that's come up is around when we do get into a relationship, particularly around debt. What debt am I bringing into the relationship? And this is a very important one, and thanks for the reminder to touch on this. Because that debt, when you bring it into your relationship, it's part of your contribution to the relationship. And it can put strain on your relationship, and it is unfair to expect your partner to carry your contribution or your burden in terms of financial management or mismanagement. If you have racked up debt, is it good debt or bad debt? Now, good debt is things like a house, a bond, you know, things like that. If it's been negligent debt, so spending, gambling, being irresponsible, it is unfair to expect your partner to carry that debt with you. So you need to have that conversation up front in terms of how do you manage this and who is going to be responsible for settling this debt. And while you're settling this debt, how are you going to manage your portion of the responsibilities when it comes to the relationship and living together? And it's very important to put that boundary down in terms of what you're bringing in and how you are co-creating your relationship. And if someone is coming into the relationship with large amounts of debt, that for me would be a caution in terms of this person's spending patterns and behaviors when it comes to managing money. And who then is going to be responsible for managing the finances in your household, and what level of trust is there going to be when it comes to being open and honest and transparent about spending in your relationship, because that could be a red flag.
very true.
I
I
see
see.
there's a
Yeah, nice
question
questions
for
coming in.
you. Yeah, I think that's one's for you. How do you know how much
Oh,
car to buy with your income?
from one guy to another, there's no limit. No, I'm joking. Yeah, this is a very ego one. And for me, I mean, the car is a tool. It's to get me from one place to the next. For others, it's a status symbol. There, we've got to look at, I first want to dig a bit more into that, is the finance terms around it. So please, please, please try and never buy a car with a balloon payment. It's only ever going to bite you in the bum. It's done to, make that more affordable from a repayment point of view. There's two rule of thumbs that I've used over the years. One I was shown before was your car shouldn't cost more than or the purchase price shouldn't be more than your annual income. So if you earn R500,000 a year, you spend R500,000 on a car. The other, which I lean more towards, is you shouldn't be spending more than 10% of your income on all your vehicle related expenses. So that's the car installment, the insurance, because we often forget that. When the motor plan runs out, what is that going to cost? Your annual license fees, and obviously the fuel and other sundries like tires, etc. So try and keep it at around 10% of your income. That's what you take home. Factor in those costs. Also look at, is this going to be a car for business usage? Because there's a couple of tax benefits of that, and that needs to be factored in, as you do have a bit of deductibility. If you're a salaried earner with no variable income, or your vehicle is not used for business purposes, and traveling from home to work is not business, then you can't offset some of these costs. We worked with a client a few weeks ago. She is now in a fortunate position to have changed employment, get a significant increase in income, and wants to upgrade her little car, that was her first car, to a nice fancy German sports car. Well, luxury car, should I say. And it's going to take up all her monthly disposable income. So even though she can afford it today, she now has no disposable income. That car installment is more than her rent and her monthly food. So it's significantly expensive. So I think we need to make sure that it fits within your budget. And a big one to remember today, Kunrad and others, is that we're at the lowest point of an interest rate cycle. So if interest rates, and when they do go up another 1-2%, can you still afford those repayments? So make sure that is factored in. And remember, your car depreciates continuously. So it is by no means an asset.
See, there's another one for you. It says, Terence mentioned we should not put all our money in retirement funds. What other instruments can we use? And I know somebody spoke earlier about tax-free savings accounts as well. So maybe you can talk about those at the same time.
Brilliant. So I'm not saying don't make use of retirement funds. They are fantastic vehicles. Your contributions are tax deductible within certain limits. There's tax-free growth. We all love that. So that you get your return on your investment is now free of tax. But there are a couple of restrictions on them, on where your funds can be invested, when you can access your money, etc. So they are fantastic. They also protect us from ourselves, because sadly, majority of people are very poor with money. That's why that stat floats around. Only 6% of South Africans can afford to retire comfortably. Use your retirement funding that's available and put it in retirement approved products. But like Paula said, the recent release, and now it's 5 years old, so I can't call it recent anymore, of tax-free savings accounts or tax-free investment accounts are spectacular products. So you can invest up to 36,000 Rand a year. That is contributions. That's the money you put in. Your growth is unlimited, and it is also tax-free. There is no restriction on where you can place your funds. So you can now look at a greater offshore exposure if that meets your risk appetite, and if you can handle the volatility. Because I want you to think of a tax-free account as a very long-term investment vehicle. It's something that you're going to keep for the next 10, 15, 20 years and longer, because you want to try and max out your contributions. So at the moment, Treasury has that at 500,000 Rand as a maximum. So if you as an investor are contributing 3,000 Rand a month, which is 36 grand a year, that's your limit there. It's going to take you about 13 and a half, 14 years to reach your limit. You can no longer put money in, but it will continue to grow. And conservative numbers, I did this for a client last week because they wanted to know if it's even worth it. Yes, it is. If you did that, you reached your limit in 14 years and you left the funds to grow, and we assumed an offshore portfolio, and I assumed a 12% return for 25 years, so until they retired, that's a 3.5 million Rand pot of tax-free money that you can now draw an income from in retirement. Paula, the last one I want to touch on there with the tax-free is a lot of investors are worried about this 500,000 Rand limit. I do not think it's an issue. Firstly, because tax-free accounts are only 5.5 years old, so no one is near the limit, okay? Also, the limit was 30 grand, it became 33, it's now 36. So people are far, far away from it. And as we've seen Treasury increase the annual limit, I do strongly believe they're going to increase the lifetime limit as investors now approach it. So that will also be increased. So we mustn't think of the limit now as we can never exceed it, not from a contribution point of view, but from a growth point of view, it is unlimited.
Good insights there. Thanks, Terence. And I see people are saying, like your holistic approach, especially cost of a car, we just look at monthly installments, not all the other costs. Yes, so we've got a couple of minutes, last few minutes left. If anybody would like to ask a question now or just make a comment, please feel free to unmute yourself or any last minute questions you want us to answer. We're here to meet your needs and answer your questions.
So Paula, I just want to urge everyone, if they haven't revised, reviewed, or read their will in the last 12 months, whip it out this week, have a look, book an appointment with someone and get that will updated. It is so, so important. The same with your investments. As you've said, where should we be? What should we invest it in? Review your funds, review where you are, make sure you have an investment strategy. And then also, it's coming up to medical aid review time. So all the major schemes have released their increases or no increases or how they're going to work, change in benefits. Sit down with a person that specializes in medical aid and hospital plans, know what your options are for 2021, because that window to make changes is going to open soon, and it's only for about 4 to 6 weeks. So now's the time to make adjustments for next year. And recent conversation I had, again, I love to pull in scenarios. Clients are thinking they're going to start a family next year. They're planning for that. So now's a good time to increase your medical aid plan to make provision for that next year, because childbirth is very expensive.
Yeah, so I see we've got more questions coming through, so we might go a little over time if everybody is okay with that. I understand if people need to drop off. As I said, we are recording it and we will send it out. So a question is, would you recommend a joint bank account? I'm a bit anxious about it. So in that case, no, you don't have to have a joint bank account. There is no hard and fast rules. There's no right and wrong. It is what feels most comfortable to you and your partner in your relationship. So if you don't want to have a joint bank account, you can have separate bank accounts. You can then agree on who's paying for what, and you manage those accounts and responsibilities individually. Or you can have individual accounts and set up a house account where you pay money in for all the household expenses, and all the debit orders go off that account so that you know that your day-to-day and your monthly expenses are being covered, and then you are responsible for your own individual expenses and money. So that's a way to do it if you are feeling a little bit anxious. Can someone review or draft a will also be or include rich ideas? I think yes, speak to Terence. He's got lots of rich ideas to chat to you about, and he can help you with your will as well. See, Kunrad says, what happens if a spouse passes away? I'm assuming this is from a will point of view, so I'll let you answer that. And from a bank account point of view, yeah, I mean, you can answer that as well. But when your partner or spouse passes away, everything is frozen to begin with.
Yes, correct.
And then it's a process to go through the estate, depending on if there is a will, if there are executives, etc., etc. But I think, Terence, you more, that's your area of expertise.
Yeah, and that's my concern with joint bank accounts. Also, I used to work at one of the big banks. I was there for 7 years. They don't do joint bank accounts anymore. So it's normally an account in someone's name with someone else having signing power or a power of attorney on it. And as Conrad has quite rightly said, at the time of death, once the bank is notified of that, they freeze your bank account. So I do highly recommend everybody have their own. And even if you go and get a cheapie from Capitec, you know, they cost $6 or $7 a month just to have it. Have your own bank account, maybe have a home bank account. Like Paula's alluded, is, you know, the cost to run our home for the rent, the food, the insurances is 20,000 Rand a month, and however you're going to split it up, and that goes into a joint account, which you both can sign on. But have your own. It also creates complications at time when, for instance, policies have to pay out or investments, because they can only pay out into a bank account in your name. Now, if that's going into a spouse's account, there's going to be issues. And then, Paula, I want to put a comment in. Oh, I lost your lighting. I recorded an interesting podcast earlier. I'm going to post the link in the chat box, which is the practicalities of winding up a will. So I had a client who interviewed me for a change and asked me so many brilliant questions. So I think that will answer a lot of questions for people and just help give some insights into some estate and will practicalities.
That's good. And while you're talking about reviewing wills and policies and medical aids, one thing that I recommend couples do is every year review your relationship, just like you would review your will or your medical aid. We don't do this as couples, and what can end up happening is we end up growing apart instead of growing together. So it's important to sit down with each other on a regular basis, whether it's quarterly, monthly, as part of your date nights, whatever it is, or at the start of the year when you set your goals for the year, to sit down and really have honest conversations with each other. And there's 3 quick little questions that you can ask. You can say, what's working in our relationship right now? Because we often look at the negatives in our relationship and the negatives of what our partner is or isn't doing. We very seldom look at the positives. So what's working in your relationship, and how do you make sure that you do more of that so that you keep getting more of the same? Then the next question you can ask is what areas can we improve on? Now, this is very different to asking what's going wrong or what's not working in our relationship, which can just open a whole can of worms, and people can become defensive and reactive, because straight away, it's almost like we're criticizing or judging and whatever. So the question is, what areas can we improve on? And then the third question that we can ask is, how can I be a better partner for you? Because we show up in the way that we want to, and that feels familiar and comfortable for us, but it may not necessarily be how our partner needs us to be there for them. So it's important to get that feedback from each other and for each other so that you can strengthen your relationship, see it as an investment into your relationships, and the rewards or the returns on it is that you grow stronger and stronger together and you grow as a couple.
Brilliant.
So,
Paula, this was awesome. Thank you. I've enjoyed it. I hope everyone else has got some good value. Any final questions, ladies and gents, as we wrap up for the evening? Oh, thank you there.
We must have done a fantastic job.
Something that I found tremendously valuable from Paula is I went through a nice long journey with her on a brilliant coaching program that she offers. And it's value setting for yourself, but also with your spouse. And that was an enlightening conversation to have with my wife. So if you haven't done such a thing, I highly recommend you reach out to Paula. She'll give you some guidance what to do and book that value session, because now we've determined what our family values are, made a nice printout of it. It's on the fridge, and everything we do must align to those values. And it's amazing how we haven't said a harsh word to each other in 6 months because we align everything to our values.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. We've enjoyed spending this time with you. We hope you've got lots of food for thought and insights to walk away with. You have our details. I will send out the link to the recording. If there's anything else that comes up, please feel free to get in touch with either Terence or myself. We really are here to help you, and we want to set you up for success financially and from a relationship perspective.
Take care.
Okay, everybody.